What's up guys, welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be going through 5 RPG games that you need to play before you die. First up, we got Final Fantasy VI. This game shines from its story and its characters. If you get all the characters that you can get, you'll end up with 14. And the cool thing in this game is that each character really does feel like they play a part in the story. You never really feel like there's any time where like any characters are being neglected or you don't really need to use any. And it gets to the point where sometimes you really do feel like the main character almost changes. And by the second half of the game, you really feel that each character is contributing equally to the story and that they're almost as important as each other. Now, there's no way I can talk about characters and not talk about the greatest villain in gaming history, in my opinion. Kefka is basically evil just for the sake of being evil. Imagine taking the Joker from Batman and just throwing him in a JRPG, and that's pretty much what you get with Kefka. The cool thing about the way Kefka was portrayed in this game is that from the start to the finish, he never really changes his personality. His mentality stays exactly the same throughout. He doesn't really have an ulterior motive. He just wants to be evil. And that's another thing that the game does really well. Even without voice acting, you do really see the character's personality really shine through. Like, you see Kefka and how much of a lunatic he is. You see how whimsical Edgar can be. You see how brash Sabin can be. You see how mysterious Shadow is. And you know, the list goes on and on and on. If I was to describe the game overall, I'd describe it as a game of two halves. The first half is quite linear, and then the second half, the world is basically your oyster and you're free to do whatever you want. In terms of gameplay, this game uses the active time battle system. Every character has their own unique ability in combat. For example, Edgar can use his tools, Sabin has blitzers, Shadow can throw weapons at enemies, and so on. There are a bunch of summons in this game, and that's also how you learn different spells. So even if your character does end up stronger than the summon, they still play an important part in the gameplay. I will say though that in the second half of the game, your characters can start to feel a bit similar just because everybody knows the same spells. Lastly, in terms of difficulty, this game really is as hard as you want it to be. If you want to go through the game without any extra grinding, then it'll be a good fair challenge, but if you choose to level up, then it'll probably be a breeze. Now, the next game that I'm going to cover is Chrono Trigger, and this is one of the greatest games that you could ever hope to play. One of the best things that make Chrono Trigger so great is just how simple it is. It has an amazing story which is really easy to follow. You do a bit of time traveling in this game, but it's done in a way where everything is still really simple and easy to follow, and the game really does a good job of getting it right and keeping everything clean. The best thing about the characters is that they all have a distinct personality from each other. For example, Chrono, he's a silent protagonist. Meryl, she's a princess. Luca, she's a genius. There's a character named Frog who is obviously a frog. So the diversity in the cast really keep the game fresh and everyone adds their little bit of something. This is one of the few games that I've ever played that actually gets New Game Plus right. There are 16 different endings and you're able to fight the final boss actually quite early into the game, but you'll only be able to do that unless you're doing New Game Plus. And this also adds to the replayability of the game, just being able to go again and again and again and just trying to unlock all these different endings you can get. Now, I will absolutely die on this hill and say that Chrono Trigger has the best soundtrack in the history of gaming. You could literally listen to the music in this game day after day and never get sick of it. It is that good. The overall length of the game seems to hit a sweet spot. It's about 25 to 30 hours long, so it's never going to feel too short or too long, but there is a lot of replayability, as I said before. One of the things that go unnoticed with this game is just how much restraint was shown by the developers, and that restraint helps add the simplicity to the game. Each character has a specific weapon type and only they can use that specific weapon. For example, Meryl can use a bow and Luca can use a gun, but neither of them can swap weapons. And the magic system is just as simple. Each character has their own element and only they can use that element. The game uses active turn-based combat, which still holds up to this day. Each of the characters pull their weight, especially in combat. You never feel like one character is more usable than the other or that you have to stop using someone because they're too weak. Everyone kind of levels each other out, and you really do play as a party as opposed to just having one character curb stomp the game. And random encounters are not a thing in this game. Every enemy you can fight, you can see them on screen. So how you choose to engage the enemies is entirely up to you. You can choose to fight them and gain some XP and level up, or you can just avoid them. It's up to you. I always felt that this added a tiny layer to the gameplay and it just made everything feel a little bit more free flowing. But I'd say the thing that stands out the most in this game is just how compelling and tragic the story can be at times, and there are alternate endings like I said before. So you could get a happy ending, you could get a bad one, you could get one in the middle, and the twists and turns in this game are where the story really shines. Throughout the game, you always think you have it figured out. You think you know who the bad guy is. You think you know who the good people are. And then it gets flipped on its head again and again and again. And then by the end of the story, you don't really know who's who. But if I could only recommend one game for someone to play, this would definitely be the one. Now, I know I said Chrono Trigger is the best game on this list, but this is easily my favorite. This is a weird game because you're going to have to kind of play it twice to really appreciate how great the story is. Believe me, the first time you play the game, you're really going to like it. The second time you play it, you're going to love it. The story is incredibly gripping, but the first time you play it, you're going to find it a little bit confusing, which is one of the reasons you're going to have to play it twice, but also the second time you play it, there's going to be a lot of eureka moments where you think, oh, that's why that was placed there. Oh, that's why that character did that instead of the other thing. But I don't want you to think that I'm telling you to play a game that's basically Inception. Believe me, it's not the case. For 80% of the game, the story doesn't really change. It's the last 20 that'll get you. And that last 20% is when your mind just keeps getting blown and you're just getting hit in the feels over and over again. Now, obviously you can't have a great story without great characters, and this game is no exception. There are 7 playable characters, with the main one being Titus. Titus is young and brash, and all he wants to do is get back home. Throughout his journey, he befriends 6 people to help him do that. The best thing about this ensemble of cast is that they do all genuinely care for each other in an authentic way, and it almost starts to feel like they're a family as opposed to just a group of friends. You have Yuna, who's honest, loyal, and polite, and almost too young to understand how cruel the world can really be. You have Auron, who's a strict, no-nonsense, dignified warrior who's almost the voice of reason for the group. Waka and Lulu serve almost as Yuna's older brother and sister. Kimari, who's been Yuna's protector since she was a child. And Riku, who almost serves as the younger sister of the group. All the characters are really memorable, and they all have their own personalities, and you can see how they grow throughout the game. By the end of the game, the characters you started with are almost totally different people, but in a good way where you can see them maturing and not just changing who they are. The game is pure turn-based, so you'll always have time to stop and think and strategize about your next move. And this works well with the character setups because each character has their own role in terms of which enemy they should be attacking. For example, Waka, he specializes in attacking flying enemies because of his accuracy. Auron's great at attacking enemies with high defense. Lulu deals with the elemental enemies, and I think you guys get the gist of it. And this ties in well with the turn-based combat because you may need to switch characters in or out depending on the enemies. The game is quite linear, but there is quite a bit to do outside of the story. The only problem you're going to have is that when you're doing the stuff outside of the story, you're either in or you're out, because it is quite an investment in time to actually get strong enough to do all of those things like fighting Dark Aeons or fighting Penance. But honestly, you'd really only be doing that as a completionist. I've done it and it didn't really make me feel any better or worse about the game. Like I said before, the main draw card about this game is the story and just how compelling and enthralling it is. And the thing I'm super grateful about this game is that in the remastered version, the cutscenes all definitely hold up to today's standards as well, which is great because we get these moments throughout the game where it's emotional and touching and you actually get a cutscene that matches the overall tone. And like I say, everything about this game needs to revolve around the story and making it as appealing as possible, because it is one of the great stories in gaming, and that's also why it'll probably always remain one of my favorite games ever. Okay, up next we got Ghost of Tsushima. The story's compelling, nerve-wracking, haunting, heartbreaking, and any other adjective you want to add in. This game has one of the most beautiful landscapes you'll ever play in a video game, the cinematics and voice acting are brilliant, and the map is immersive enough to keep the game feeling fresh. The story revolves around a guy named Jin, who's a samurai who's trying to protect his homeland. He realizes pretty early that he's probably going to have to go against his moral code and the way of the samurai in order to protect his homeland. Jin needs to save his homeland, but he might need to go outside the teachings of the samurai code to do so. This inner conflict presents itself as a constant theme throughout the game. The characters you meet along the way are engaging and they make you take an interest in what their objectives are. It wouldn't be unusual to put the story on hold and just do a lot of the side content because it is so engaging and enthralling. The combat is where the game shines. Early on, you're going to be playing as a generic samurai with fast and strong attack. Then you unlock different stances to use on enemies depending on their weapon type. This can add a layer of intensity to each fight when you have 6 or 7 enemies with multiple weapons someone's gunning for you. Because if you don't pick the right stance, you're gonna be in trouble. Generally speaking, anything to do with sounds is really well done, and that goes from the background music, to the sound of animals, to the wind howling, to the clash of swords in battle. You just can't fault it. I love how the HUD is minimal, and the camera is always closed in on Jin, so you really start to feel that you're just watching a high-end samurai movie and not really just playing a game. This is a game where you really want to savor the story, because the fun kind of just ends after the story, since there's not much to do other than go hunting for collectibles or finishing leftover side quests, but the ride you go on is 100% worth it, believe me. Last up to bat, we got The Witcher 3. Now, if anyone gives this game less than a 9, they need to be drug tested. The story is so fleshed out, and it's an easy 10 out of 10. It has alternate endings that can make you feel happy, sad, or both. The game is so immersive that it makes you feel like you're in the story making decisions that affect the outcome of the game, especially with the dialogue options and how a response can affect whether someone befriends you or becomes your enemy. The voice acting is impeccable, especially for the witches, since they're not supposed to have any emotion, but it's still conveyed in a way that they still sound authentic. These side quests could all be main quests in other video games. You can get lost for days just doing side quests that you forget about the main story. This is one of the few games I've played where I can't fault the world you get dropped into. The graphics are still amazing in 2026. The amount of detail that went into this is insane. The world is as close to perfect as you can get. When you travel to a new area, it feels like a brand new place, not just a copy and paste of somewhere you've already been. The combat's aged pretty well. I mean, back in 2015 it was probably off the top shelf, but in 2026 it's still great, but it's probably not at the standard of other games that have been released since. The Witcher 3 probably has the greatest minigame that's ever been created, and that's Gwent. That is the most addictive minigame I've ever played in a video game. I seriously couldn't wait to get every single card I could possibly find in that game. There's as much content in the expansion DLCs as there is in most standalone games, and the quality and care is still maintained in those. There's no drop off in effort from the studio either. The only problem I've ever had with The Witcher 3 is that it sets the bar so high for open world games that you start comparing every new one you play to it, and it almost makes you think less of those games straight off the bat. But The Witcher 3 is definitely a game that should be on everyone's must play list.